Welcome to Direction Correct, a Peoplings podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Philip Arkcoll.
Thanks to our sponsors, Worklytics. Generate actionable insights from work data while protecting your privacy using workplace analytics with our partners, Worklytics. I have an interesting question for you. And being in this office made me think of it because there's this bust over here of a head that has a phrenology on it. So you remember, like, they always use it phrenology as the example of, like, bunk science that is not real, right?
Testing criminal behavior by filling the bumps on your head, this sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's like very detailed and everything and ornate. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I was thinking about it because at the time when they were doing it, they were like, this is the best science in the world. And it was like, what is right now the equivalent to organizational phrenology that we're doing? 'Cause some of the stuff that we're doing is obviously bunk, it's messed up. Like what are we doing right now that 20 years or 100 years from now they'll be like, oh, they were reading the bumps on people's heads.
It's the sort of things, so you'd have to look for things that currently have that are A, considered soft, and B, low validation.
Well, like I was just thinking about it, like there was the whole replication crisis has been going on, right? We've talked about it a few times. Like if you really went to like the core of the replication crisis, to me it seems like it's motivated reasoning. So it's like beliefs in scientific practices that we want to be true. And so we find ways of like skewing the data to make it become true when it really might not be. And so I feel like all of the different, like, let's call them fads, like anything that's a fad is probably organizational phrenology, is kind of my rule of thumb.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And you have a lot of these sort of old wine, new bottle sort of things. Like, do you remember like at PSYOP, there's a clout was a big thing for 1 year. It's like 2013, 2014, or not that big data is phrenology by any means, but you like to your point, you get these sort of like fads that kind of come in and out.
See, I actually take the opposite stance on that. If it's something that we rediscover over and over again, that's like multi-trait, multi-method, right? That's showing examples of the same validity over time, right? Just from different methods that come into it. Now, a lot of it has to do with branding. And again, I was say somebody wants to get tenure, so they rediscover something that we've already known about for a long time under a different name. But in a way, that to me, that's confirmatory evidence that it exists. It's usually something that's super novel that's never been found before that is more likely to be phrenology.
Yeah, I get that. Like you're definitely hitting on or like the researchers hitting on something that has some sort of merit there. I guess you have to look at things that just come out of the blue. So like multiple intelligences, or these like two-spirit sort of orientations to personality. That's like, okay, I get that it's like your personal experience, but actually verify this with the data.
Well, that's why I go back to the motivated reasoning. People want something to be true, and so that they're going to find a way to research it and say that it's true.
Well, I mean, even our instruments to detect these sort of things are set up to find that information. Like if you have a proton collector at the Antarctic, you're going to find protons from the sky.
Not going to find any neutrons with that proton collector.
Phil, what's happening, man?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Are we doing Phil or are we doing Philip? What are we doing today?
Whatever tickles your fancy.
I don't know if you want us to tickle your fancy, Philip or Phil.
My closer friends call me Phil. Professionally, people call me Phil's good. Phil's good. Let me just take my blur off. Hold on.
That's delightful.
Do I have too much light back here? Cole, looks like you have a ton as well. So
yeah, we're like, this isn't a podcast for people who look good, Philip. So we're not making a bunch of followers because we look good working out or something.
I'm getting older and like my eyes are going blurry in a lot of occasions, so I'm glad you took the filter off. It's not me.
Yeah, you don't know which it is.
We were talking about Phil before you joined. What do we think is the equivalent? Like there was a point in time where phrenology was considered a best in class science of reading like the bumps in people's heads and the past of psychology. And of course, obviously that didn't stand the test of time. What is the equivalent today in today's science of what 20 years or 100 years from now they'll say is phrenology? And we were just kind of having some fun with that. So I thought I don't know, do you have any interesting thoughts on what you might think that might be?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is in the O&A space. I mean, reading those charts, so people kind of think that they can kind of visualize those, those network charts and then look at them and somehow glean. I think that's been dispelled pretty quickly, but you still get people, they're so attractive.
As an O&A guy, you are spot on. Like I see this over and over, especially if you get a chart more than 100 nodes in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible.
It's reading tea leaves, especially when like you apply various algorithms to it, to force directed algorithms to place the nodes in various spots. You can make it look like anything you want and tell people it looks like anything. That's why you got to lean on the actual metrics, the graph derived metrics.
Yeah, exactly. What other examples did you guys have outside of the people analytics space?
I mean, the one I was saying is any of the science that is based in motivated reasoning. So if somebody wants to find the conclusion because it, is self-serving in some sort of way, all of that science it has already started to kind of be debunked with like the replication crisis. But I think anything that, is not, you don't find from multiple, I used the example multi-trait, multi-method earlier. It's like if you're not finding the same thing from multiple different methods over time in a repeated fashion, it's probably not real.
That one's so tough to fix though, because that's, underlying incentives. You have to completely restructure the incentives. People are just following, where the incentive or where the money is, or
absolutely. That's the replication crisis where people pose a result, get it published, and then these journals are less likely to publish a study that confirms it or denies it in the future. That just becomes the bit of evidence, going forward.
Yeah, I think there was a big nudging casualty that happened this week, kind of along those lines. Some Harvard professor. No, it was like, I think it was one of these behavioral economists who had been researching nudging. I should probably have done more research on this if I'm going to share it publicly. I think they had shown that they had been fabricating their data, and they were a Harvard researcher, and it's like, oh, this is a big, hoo-ha in the scientific enterprise.
I mean, there's so many choices that go into the research process that, outside people don't understand. I mean, this is everything from like, COVID research to, psychological research to, kind of anything, organizations, et cetera. You make so many choices in the process that you can essentially mold the data to say anything you wanted to say and come out with the outcome, whether you're selection bias or, non-randomized trials, like all these sort of crazy things.
Yeah. I mean, just beyond that though, anything that involves people, context is so important in the kind of workspace. What type of work were they doing? Were they engineers? Were they project managers? Were they managers? Were they individual contributors? Were they and the results could be just totally different. So it's tough to go to academic research and pull out answers that you can apply in any situation in the real world at work, because the context of your organization, the structure, the industry you're in, everything is so, can change so much about those underlying results and how they would apply in the real world.
This is the foundation of what situational leadership, right? It's like, just essentially throw up your hands, but we don't know. Well, it really depends on all these sort of things, but essentially just boils down to, initiating structure and don't be a jerk.
When the whole contingency theory and organizational theory research is basically do different things in different situations. It's like, okay, well, that's really helpful. Philip, let me introduce you really quickly, just so our audience knows who you are. So Philip Arkcoll is the co-founder and CEO of Worklytics, a workplace insights platform that generates actionable insights from work data while protecting your employee privacy. He has an extensive background in technology, focused on helping organizations design compelling employee and user experiences. He holds an honors degree in computer science and management from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. Well, we've got a South African on the podcast. I guess I don't know. Are you a South African? What is kind of? I think you've moved around a little bit, Philip. Do you mind telling us a little about that?
I don't know what to call myself. I was my mother's Brazilian. I was born in Brazil, lived earlier part of my life there, and then went to South Africa. Went through school in South Africa, to university there, and then ended up in Europe. Worked in London for a while, worked in Spain for a number of years, and then more recently came to the United States, lived in New York, and now I live in Washington and Seattle.
You're local. I didn't know that. Are you a Stormers fan? Cape Town rugby?
Yeah, that's some pretty specific knowledge there. Yes, I am a Stormers fan.
Thank you, Google.
I love how I was like, Scott, where are you pulling this from, man?
No, my knowledge of rugby is exceptionally limited, but I do enjoy rugby sevens, despite the fact that the games last like 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think at one point rugby was the fastest growing sport in the United States. I don't know if it still is. Maybe it's changed to something else, but
I think it's pickleball. I always hear it's pickleball now. Have either of you ever played pickleball?
I have not, but I'm dying to try.
It's like a combination of ping pong and tennis mixed together is kind of what I gather. I've never played, but I'm a member at a club that has some pickleball courts, and I think that people like it because they drink in one hand and they play with their little ping pong paddle in their other hand, and that sounds a lot like the United States, you know.
Well, I think the other advantage is it's a way more efficient use of space, right? You can turn one tennis court into 3 pickleball courts or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're space constrained, which we are not in Texas, generally speaking, but yeah, I feel you on that. Philip, do you mind telling us a little bit about Worklytics? So what is it? What do you guys do? And since you co-founded the company, why did you do that? Like what was kind of your passion area that kind of made the genesis of the idea behind the company?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Worklytics is a workplace insights platform. We help organizations get access to and analyze anonymized data from common work tools. So things like Office 365, email, calendar, OneDrive, Slack, all of the G Suite set of tools, and then the long tail in things like GitHub and Jira and Salesforce. You name it. And we analyze data from those tools to understand what is the day-to-day life of an employee like, help improve employee experience, identify underlying drivers and things like employee well-being and potentially things that are driving burnout, understand collaborative networks. I think we'll maybe talk a little bit about O&A today as well, looking at how those networks influence outcomes in organizations, how they can be optimized, bottlenecks, etc. How I got into this space is, I think, from a slightly different perspective from most people. I came at it from a management perspective. So I was a manager in a startup that grew relatively quickly, ended up leading a pretty big organization and a large team, the same for my co-founder. And then we were acquired by a massive telco, the AT&T of Europe, essentially, and had to deal with the conflict of a smaller startup working, or a relatively smaller startup working with this huge organization, all of these changes in dynamics, etc. And I was always frustrated by the fact that as a leader, you have very little information and guidance on a lot of the kind of typical questions that come up. How should you structure your team? How large is the optimum team size? Is it better to have bigger teams, bigger spans of control, or really small teams? How often should you meet with your team, bring everybody together, have regular one-on-ones, etc. And a lot of those decisions are made through intuition, essentially, a feeling about, we spoke about this a little earlier, a feeling about the context, what's right, what might work right, with a little bit of guidance from what other people are doing. And there's very little data-driven insight into what you should do, what is the right answer for a particular configuration in this organization, and how do you get to more data-centric answers on those things. And so we started to think, and we had this intuition that there's all this data on how people work, how we get things done in the office, how we collaborate, sitting in all of these tools, but the data is all over the place. It's hard to get access to. It's kind of a mess. How do you bring it all together How do you deal with things like employee privacy to make people feel like you're working with the data in a way that they can trust, and deliver insights from all of it? And so that's essentially what we do at Worklytics. We combine all of those data points together, and we build data sets for people analytics, for people teams to answer typical people questions through a better understanding of what work and collaboration looks like in their organizations.
That's amazing. It's a heroic task to bring together all these data sets, especially when you're faced with like all the privacy issues, especially the new things coming up in, California, Illinois, New York, obviously GDPR, this sort of thing. There's so many issues that companies are facing right now, coming back to the office and like how to build teams. Like what do you think, or what do you hear from your clients is the biggest issue that they're facing and where they need the most help with their data analysis needs?
Yeah, good question. I think I can answer that question at two levels. So one is just getting access to the data. I think that can be very difficult for people analytics teams. You laugh, so I feel like you might have experienced this yourself.
Had these conversations before, definitely. Yeah.
So in many cases, you're sitting within HR, and the data is owned by completely different sets of teams. It's owned by IT, and you need to navigate all of the internal politics and the resourcing required. You need to navigate legal and privacy, compliance, and employee comms, etc. It is difficult to get access to this type of data. So I think predominantly that's one of the main problems that we solve is we have a layer that automatically filters all PII out of the data, that sanitizes it. So we strip out all the content, we strip out any sensitive data, we aggregate it up to the group level. We have automatic connectors that automatically pull the data on a continual basis, so the IT team doesn't have to do a lot of work to integrate it. It just kind of works on the fly. And then we provide clean data sets of that type to people science, people insights teams, so they can start to work with that data. So that I think is one of the main challenges, is just how do you get access to good, clean data of this type? And then beyond that, what are the kind of typical problems that we work with companies to solve with this type of data? Well, that's evolved a lot over the past few years. As you've talked a lot about on the podcast. It used to be, how do we adapt to remote? We've had this sudden huge change. Can we even function as a remote organization? And then we've been remote for a year. Are things still working? What are the impacts of being remote for so long? Then Great Resignation, what's driving that? What are the underlying issues that we need to adopt here? And then organizations trying to think about bringing people back to the office, to implementing return to office policies, getting everybody back or partially back in many cases, and struggling with some of the friction around that. And I think that we're kind of in the middle of that moment right now. A lot of organizations wanting to know.
I feel like one of the things that I've really appreciated about your organization is you guys have published some amazing research on answering questions like this. Have you all looked at, what are some of the factors that are playing into this? And would you like to share any of that research?
Good question. Yeah. So, I mean, we've had a front seat into all of these major events over the last couple of years. It's been a fascinating time to be in this space, see all of the major changes. Right now in return to office, dealing with a lot of organizations thinking about how do they create return to office programs that are attractive for employees? I think in-office density is a challenge. Many organizations are struggling to get as many people as they want back into the office as frequently as they want, or to define what the right policy is. So should we have anchor days and get everybody back on the same day? Should we allow teams to decide for themselves? Should we have some kind of 50% time in the office, some kind of lower bound on what that time is? And then, how do we create a great environment that allows people to, and great policies that allow people to feel like they're using their time well when they're in the office, and do the types of work that are better to do in person when they're in the office, and then focus on things that are better to do at home when you are in a space where you can kind of be heads down and focus more. So just a lot of change, dealing with that change and applying data to try to answer what the right policies and guidance are for each of these different scenarios to help remove that friction and get organizations functioning as well as possible through all of this change as they adapt.
Well, what do you think are the, I don't know, levers that organizations can pull to make people want to come back to the office? I have my own thoughts on how we could do this, but I mean, obviously, like every organization is different, like you have different circumstances. But what are the common themes that you are seeing in the data or from your clients that can help, encourage people to come back to the office?
Yeah, good question. So the one thing that we've seen is peer density when in the office. So
Yep.
what we look at is your close network. Who are the people that you work with on a daily basis, on a weekly basis? And those might not be people in your team. They might be people in other parts of the org, on a particular project, other leaders, etc. Peer collaborator density when you're in the office is quite critical. And the reality is that it tends to be quite low. A lot of seating plans in the office are designed around HR structure. So you're put together with other people that are kind of in your same function. And if you have a cross-functional project, the people you work with are in other parts of the office or on other floors or in other places. And then there's been a lot of kind of people moving out of cities during the pandemic because of the high cost of living in cities. People thought it'd be better to yeah, exactly. And so that leads to even less density in the office. You have, teammates that are hybrid, that come in less often. And so what we've seen from a data perspective, we looked at badge data and combined that with network data. And in the typical organization we've looked at so far, we find that when people come into the office, they're only ever in the same space as around 20 to 30% of their peers. So it's a kind of a small number of your closest peers are around you in the office. And we looked at the impact that has on people's perception of hybrid work, of these ways of work. And the lower your peer density is, the more you feel like coming into the office is a waste of time. It's kind of self-evident, but if you're going to go through a 1-hour commute and nobody you work with is there, you're working with all these people that are in all of these other spaces or on different floors, etc. And it's frustrating because you feel like you're losing efficiency and you're not gaining much value from that time. So with that in mind, how can you better design spaces? How can you design teams? How can you restructure around those challenges? How can you build better tooling to create that density when people are in and allow for people to work well when they're more distributed?
This is an absolutely fascinating topic area that I just love to think about quite often, because I do believe that there is a tipping point. Like if you can get a certain number of your peers around you to come to the office, you are more likely to come in yourself. And it's not rocket science, really. It's social cohesion, it is homophily, it is just social norms and culture that we come in the office and we all deal with each other. But Phil, there's another line of research that called space syntax that I don't know if you guys incorporate in your tools, but essentially they find crazy things like if you are more than 50 to 60 feet away from somebody, the odds of you interacting drop to almost zero. You might as well not even be in the same planet. So you need to actually get people together in such a way that they were more likely to run into each other and either pass each other on the way to the bathroom or just interact from a productivity standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, all these great things that we can explore.
Well, Scott, I had a question for you, because you said when you asked Philip the question, you said you had some ideas for getting people to come back. Was there any ideas that Philip didn't share from their research that you have seen from things that you've seen out in the research yourself?
Well, I mean, essentially, it's just that the tipping point idea that you have a certain number of folks on your team, or you make it worthwhile for people to come in, right? And you develop a culture from that. That just becomes the norm. The same way if you had January 1st, I'm going to start a new gym regimen. I'm going to go to the gym every day. And after a week, most people kind of peter out, unfortunately, this sort of thing. But what you need is a gym buddy, somebody that's relying on you to show up at the gym yourself, right? And that makes it far more likely to get your ass out of bed and go to the gym, right? If someone's going to be there waiting for you.
Would you call that an accountability buddy? Is that what we're talking about here?
That's the craziest term ever, but yeah, sure. I'm game for it.
I have a good kind of practical example that we've seen a couple of customers experiment with at the moment, which is designing seeding plans using the network data. So instead of seeding network clusters together, instead of creating seeding clusters around HR data, can you look at closed peer networks and try to create those clusters in the office, put them in the same corner of the office, on the same floor, or even in the same kind of island of desks? It sounded like maybe you've done some of that before.
There's some like really good external research, largely from the economist world. It essentially shows these natural experiments of, say, like a university has like an asbestos problem, and they'll take people from various, professors from different departments and like throw them into a common space because, is the circumstances dictate it. And their odds of publishing research and groundbreaking research is like 20 times better. That's a fake number pulled out of the air, but much greater than it would be expected if they had to walk across the quad, as it were. So you could do the same thing in an organization, either put teams that should be collaborating next to each other or teams you wouldn't expect to collaborate next to each other, but maybe some good magic will happen there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's spot on. I mean, it makes me, the one thing I think of in all of that though is, what happens to the people who are more remote, who will struggle to kind of come in more and connect more. They're at greater risk of isolation. So I think that's the sort of flip side of the problem is, how do you make sure that they don't become second-class citizens when you have people who are closer to these hubs and can come in and create more of that cohesion over time? You need to have the tooling and the process to proactively bring those people into the fold.
What about the people like me, Philip, who just don't want to collaborate, right? Like I just want to be a hermit and not work with anybody else. Is there anything that your organization does that can help me to want to collaborate with others?
Good question. I think there's only so much you could do there, but for one, perhaps showing the value of collaborating. Some of the results you see from having better collaborative networks. So a simple example there is promotability, like the odds that you're going to rise in an organization if you're ambitious at all about doing that. Having the right networks, having senior networks, etc. Can be a strong predictor of that. So if you're happy not doing that, then maybe you're happy not creating those networks. To our point earlier, it's very context specific. There are roles that need large amount of time, focus time, uninterrupted time to get things done. Any kind of data science, deep thinking, engineering, creative writing, strategy roles, etc. They often feel like they do better when they are more isolated and less connected from the rest of the organization, when they can just be heads down for several hours and several days and focus. Collaboration can get in the way of that. So that it's not that all modes are right.
Just Cole doesn't play well with others sometimes. I think that's
there's value in all of us, Scott. Each of us.
It's a spectrum, and we all bring our own diverse perspectives.
Exactly. That's the beauty of what's going on.
It is the
here.
beauty.
Well, Philip, I think you have a question for us about like people analytics and IO psychology.
You're probably among the right people to answer. What are the main things that create differences between those two groups? And in particular, was recently listening to a discussion about where people analytics should sit in the organization. Should it be part of human resources, or should it be part of a core BI team or IT, or in some cases even we've seen it sit under finance, etc. What are the trade-offs there? And my understanding is that in the IO field, there's a strong belief that it should be within HR and the people team. And then there are people who have very strong feelings about it being outside of HR, being more closely tied to core operations of the business. What are those trade-offs, and do you have a sense of what that divide is?
I think this is more of a Cole sort of question. It's not really where my mind goes.
Yeah, I think you get the result you should expect. So if you position, people analytics to be more integrated with the business, you're going to get more business focused outcomes. If you position it within an HR function, lo and behold, you get more HR focused outcomes and perhaps less business focused. I think though, to your question about, like what role does IO psychology play and how is it related to people analytics? I posed a question a while back on LinkedIn is like, who owns people analytics? Like, and is it the IO psychologist? Is it, other folks like the business intelligence folks? And that created quite a controversy amongst different folks. I think the way that I kind of look at it, and Scott, I'd love to get your perspective as an IO as well, is IO came first. I mean, it's existed for over 100 years. And so, and a lot of the foundational research in this space was conducted by IO psychologists. But that said, I mean, I don't have data on this, but I suspect that IO psychologists only make up like a third of the people analytics field. And so you can't say, you own something or you are something when you only represent a minority stake in the field. And so there's a lot of other diverse viewpoints that I think should be and rightfully considered. One of my favorites personally, and I think our field would be lesser than if we didn't have it, is the economist view. I've taken a
Yeah.
lot of wisdom from economists over the years, but obviously there's the data scientists, the data engineers, the developers, the BI folks, and all of a bunch of other kind of social and humanities based disciplines. I've even seen the anthropologist here, the organizational sociologist, and maybe even an organizational phrenologist that we were talking about earlier, the here and there. But I don't know. What's your perspective, Scott?
I think you're absolutely right about the complementary perspectives. To go back to, Cole doesn't play well with others in the network, a kid, of course, as well as the influx of behavioral scientists and, all these other folks. It's funny you asked this. Like my thoughts on what people analytics and what IO has changed, or I've just given more thought as we've done this podcast. Like I used to think of them as largely synonymous. I've come to think of IO as a little bit more of the prediction mechanism, while there's a large swath of people analytics around, dashboarding or providing insights to leaders in kind of a passive way that they can use. But overall, I think it's just semantics. We're all here to make the organization better, make people better at what they do, and make everyone happier. I don't think people analytics or IO should sit in finance. That doesn't feel right. But overall, and once again, organizations should position this unit or these people in a place where they can make the most impact for the good of the organization. I think that's based on their context, et cetera.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll ask you this, Philip, just by nature of the organization you work for. I'm sure
Yeah.
sometimes you work with HR function and sometimes you work with non-HR functions. Do you notice a difference in the kind of the quality of outcomes or the type of research questions that are being asked or the type of way that your company is being asked to kind of stretch its product in one way or another? Do you find those questions to be qualitatively different when you work with different types of functions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we really do straddle the people team and operations and the rest of the business. I mean, really work data in many senses is operational data. How are things getting done, et cetera? And we've definitely seen more of a move, and I'm sure you've noted that, of HR into operations. Previously, I don't know that HR would have opined on how much time the organization should be, what's the optimal time to spend in meetings, and what do you do about really large meetings, and all of those types of questions start to get more into operations and questions that a CTO or a CIO or other types of those teams would answer. So, we definitely see people coming more from the business side asking more of those types of questions, and we definitely see people from the more kind of HR, people analytics or IO space asking more of the types of questions. How can this data be applied to answer questions particular to people problems, so specifically to burnout and well-being and retention and typical people questions. So there is quite a lot of variance, but I would say that the whole space is moving more in the direction of work data.
I mean, that's why I
Operations.
said this before on the podcast, I take such an expansive definition of what constitutes people analytics. As I say, the business has a variety of problems, but if you had to slice up the pie of all of their problems and just take the slice that had to deal with people or their employees or maybe even their customers in certain circumstances, that's where we play, right? And that cuts very much outside of the HR function many times. And that's why I think oftentimes if people analytics does sit in an HR function, it has to be a more of a boundary spanner than many other HR functions need to be, other than maybe like the HR business partners themselves. Philip, would you like to do a little confusion matrix with us?
Let's do it.
It might have just add to what Cole just said there before we get into this. Like, that's the beauty of network analysis, where, you know, if you're dealing with people or communication in an organization, it applies to almost everything. Okay, we got 5 questions for you, Philip. You ready?
Go, shoot.
Okay, at a restaurant, would you let someone else order for you? And you'd be okay with that?
I love that. Actually,
Oh,
I love to kind of experience somebody else's world and let them guide me.
fascinating. Cole, what about you?
It's a fun experiment to do. I did this back when it was on the dating market, is have you go on a date with someone and have each other order for the other person.
This sounds horrible.
That is a fascinating experiment to run, because it drives some people crazy, but other people, you know, so you learn a lot about them as a human being. It's like, hey, can they deal with this type of ambiguity?
I'll just
Yeah,
put
that's
myself
funny.
as a no there.
Hard no.
I mean,
period.
as long as they're not trying to game you, right, and order the worst
Yes.
thing on the menu, like as long as they're ordering something that they would order for themselves.
I have staples. So the people closest to me, I could just like walk away to the bathroom, be like, or you know what I like? Get one of these 5 things and we're gonna be all good. But
Yeah.
you know, if you're like adding like extra mayo or things to whatever, like no thank you.
I'm gonna order for Scott a hamburger with. Yeah, can you put like half a jar of mayo on this?
Well, if you order like light mayo, they give you like extra mayo. This is what it gets recoded to in the chef's brain. Philip, are you intrigued by baseball statistics? We'll say rugby statistics. We'll make it more pertinent for you.
Well, no, I am intrigued by baseball statistics, you know, and the history there. I think it's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting that it's almost the point of baseball for many people is all of the statistics.
Oh yeah,
rather than almost watching the game itself. I think that's pretty interesting. You don't see that to the same extent in games like cricket or in games like rugby, but as they become a little more Americanized, a little bit more popular in the US, you're starting to see those types of things creep in a bit more, and you know you see people be more interested in them. I think it's pretty fascinating, but not something I know a lot about, to be honest.
I'm personally offended by the last statement, because I am a big rugby statistics fan, and the fact that you would besmirch my rugby passions is just, you know, I can't deal with this, Philip.
Sorry about that.
a lot of touch statistics over there, Cole.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm at the end of my
baseball in itself is like a fascinating sport. It's like an individual sport in a team concept, but it is all metrics driven. I'd love to, it's on my list, way down the list, but like delve into sabermetrics and how they can be applied in the organization. Philip, are you comfortable with small talk?
Not a huge fan, but I've grown to be more comfortable over time.
Yeah, how is the weather in Seattle?
I probably am someone who kind of defers to deeper talk too quickly with people sometimes rather than small talk.
And by the way, both Philip and I can attest that the weather in Seattle right now is just about the perfect season. We're entering it.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Philip, can you turn down a meeting without a problem?
Oh yeah. I find I have to, you know, running a company, and as we've grown and we're partly remote and distributed as well, you know, I need time to think. I need time to think about strategy, to write things, etc. And sometimes I just have to turn meetings down, and I'm trying to more proactively do that continuously. And that's often the advice that we give customers, is to guide employees on how to have more control over their own time, their own calendars, and feel okay with saying no to meetings.
This is what Rob Cross talks about, you know, retaking your day and collaborative overload.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like I could go on a rant about this, because I'm in such a different camp than you guys, where like I feel like it's almost the same premise as people who show up like 5 or 10 minutes late for every meeting. Like, it's just disrespectful. I know Rob would say, you're taking back your life, but you're taking away from other people's lives, right? You're like, one person's life is being prioritized over 10 other people's lives. And that just drives me nuts sometimes. So like people, you set something up like 2 weeks in advance, you do all the right things, and they're like, oh, sorry, I need to cancel. Something last second came up. It's like, I know you're fucking lying. Like, shut up. Like, go to the damn meeting.
I think that's a little distinct, and that is a problem. I mean, obviously you're talking a little bit there around just being courteous and warning people ahead of time that you can't make it. But I do think some organizations as well, and we see this from a data perspective, particularly leaders will randomly show up at meetings and not in some cases. And when you're relying on them to show up to make decisions and they don't show up, then the meeting has to be rescheduled a week out. And then it's hard to get their time. And you can get into this dynamic where you're kind of delaying decisions in companies by weeks because you can't get a hold of the right people because they're so busy and in and out of these meetings. So I think you're right that there is the bad side of that. The flip side is, I would tell you in most cases that to put it in a doc, write up what you want to ask me in a doc or in an email and send it to me, and let's deal with this asynchronously. I think that's not always possible, but when it is, that's often the better solution.
Cole, one thing we've never really got into is like meeting hygiene behaviors. There's a whole line of research on this sort of stuff, just like agendas and setting this sort of stuff up. And I think you're right. If you're canceling the meeting 5 minutes before it starts, that's BS, because everyone is mentally prepared for it and this sort of thing. If it's put on your calendar, you say like, no, I like 2 weeks in advance, I don't think that's an issue. But Philip also raises a great point that if you have 10 people in a meeting, how productive is that? And there's other companies that have the culture of like, well, we got to invite Bob and Sue, but Bob can't make it, so we got to push it out 2 weeks. And then Sue, she's out on vacation, so now the meeting's a month in the future, and you get them both in the room, and neither one says a fucking thing. Like, why did we ever have this meeting in the first place? Anyway, other than that, I have no thoughts.
Yeah, it's like I think what Scott and I are saying is we have a lot of unprocessed emotions about this topic that we need to probably talk to someone about. Not publicly.
I mean, meetings are everything. I mean, they're most of work. They're most of how we spend time at work, and most of the relationships, most of the dynamics. So it's right that it is a contentious point.
Absolutely. Well, you guys ready for some nerdery?
Here, we got one more question, one more quick one. Philip, do you panic when you lose something?
You mean when I lose my wallet or my phone?
Yeah. Just lose an article.
No, I don't. No, I try not to hold on to physical possessions to that degree. I in general, I don't. If I'm about to take an international flight and I can't find my passport, maybe that's an exception where I would panic. Bit of a nervous flyer, but I don't worry that much about losing physical possessions.
I think Philip's my spirit animal. Definitely.
Yeah. While you guys are not focused on physical possessions, I'm getting into my house because I remembered my keys. So, I think there is value in, being very mindful of these type of topics.
You want to push it to the nerdery?
Let's do some nerdery. You want to do some Grand Theft Auto?
Sure. Okay.
This is fascinating.
This is fascinating. So there is a original study by Markey and Fench in 2014. Essentially, media and lawmakers suggest that there's a link between violent video games and violent crime. We've all kind of heard this sort of thing before. They did a time series analysis and essentially showed that there's no link or even a decrease in the relationship between playing video games and violent behavior. But it's correlational, and there's generalizability issues, etc. There's also a follow-up study, 2017. I forget the name, Beer Garden or something like that. I don't have it in front of me. But essentially, the release of Grand Theft Auto is related to a decrease in criminal activity from males aged 12 to 25. So they control for other covariates and this sort of thing. But essentially, all these teenagers, they're not playing. Doing criminal behaviors because they're playing the game.
Yeah, they're living vicariously through their video game actors. So instead of busting a car window, they just bust a car window digitally.
Sublimate the urge. I love it.
Yeah, I mean it's satiating the need.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I do wonder if they're underlying that is a more nefarious mechanism, which I'm a gamer myself actually, and I like games like that. I play games a lot, especially when I was younger. So I don't believe that they, at least for me, never drove me to be violent. The
But
more
tell us
nefarious
more
potential.
about this nefarious mechanism. I mean, what is this deep dark secret you have, Philip, that you want
Well,
to
no.
share on
So
a podcast?
what I worry about more is that gaming at the extreme can be a little bit like it could be an addiction, a little bit like a drug addiction, and can sap you
Oh yeah.
of your ambition and and your need to get out there and do things and succeed in life, because you feel like you're succeeding in the game, you're getting things
Wow.
done, you're achieving things that's enough of a sense of fulfillment. And I think that's potentially a big problem in society underlying this, and may be a driver.
I think that's very true. It's an escape, but it's like the land of the lotus eaters. Like you can have so much and it's good, but if you have too much, it's just have obviously detrimental effects. The same with anything, everything in moderation. But there is some good in like this cathartic release, right? Like, so why people go to these rooms where they break things, you know?
Yeah, it's like it's sapping their ambition to steal cars. Like they wanted to, create a criminal enterprise, and now their ambition was thwarted by the video game.
See, I think Cole is very like task focused too. I think he would love video games. I don't think he's into it. He can speak for himself, but I think he would love like the missions and like going down like the to-do list.
Yeah, I can't do it. And it's because like so I got super into Halo for a while.
Yeah, back in the day.
I again, the dopamine hits from these games, they just like reprogram my brain. So I have to go like cold turkey, can't do it, can't play these games, not allowed. It's a personal prohibition of mine.
The story also reminds me of like these stories that like you see a decrease in crime on Mother's Day. Just like everyone's actually with their family and not out breaking into cars or whatever. And apparently this happens in Dallas as well on Cowboy Sundays, where the cops will just go to the fire station and because there's nothing going on. Everyone's at home watching football.
Dallas
Yeah.
Cowboys are saving the world once, Sunday football game at a time. Well, I've got one that I thought was pretty interesting, was about and this came out from the MIT Technology Review. And it said the people paid to train AI are outsourcing their work to ... AI. And which I thought this was comical on one level and really problematic at a deeper level. In the sense, it's comical that they were using Mechanical Turk, which we've talked about a few times on the podcast. And these scientists did a study that estimated that somewhere between 33% and 46% of the workers that are used to train these AI models, specifically OpenAI's ChatGPT, are actually using AI to solve the AI problems, meaning that there's this circular loop of information.
Yeah.
And actually went into ChatGPT because I was like, what? There's got to be a name for this, and they called it, I believe, circular algorithmic bias. So essentially, you're creating, have you ever heard the expression "turtles all the way down"? You're creating
Yeah.
turtles all the way down of AI training AI training AI training AI, and therefore it's like there is no ground truth. And I think this is going to become a much larger problem with these AI models as time goes forward.
I mean, this is why we got to get it right now. I mean, I think Elon Musk and some other leaders were concerned, not necessarily about this specific issue, but the fact that like we're at the base development right now. It sets the foundation for everything in the future. And to your point, yeah, it's cascading problems. So the model is trained on circular data, which people, use that data, lead to bad insights, which lead to more bad data going into the model, et cetera. It's clearly a problem, and I don't know how we solve it because people are incentivized to do the work as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I actually think it's going to get worse because
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen this push to try to use simulated data. to try to train the model. So you're not even going to use real data anymore. We're going to simulate real data, and that's going to be the whole basis of these models. And I think I cut you off there, Philip. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point about simulated data. I think they are working on mechanisms to solve some of those issues that you mentioned there. But it reminded me of the other place where we see that dynamic is in SEO, search engine optimization. You know, if you're a business like ours, you're trying to drive traffic to your marketing website. Some of what gets you up in the rankings in Google search is constantly posting articles on relevant topics.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's a temptation for all these businesses, whether nefarious or not, to generate hundreds or thousands of articles using these generative models to kind of game SEO. And then these models are scraping the web and pulling that data back in. I think that's another example that is incredibly pervasive and getting worse.
Circular. Would you call it circular? What, Cole?
Circular algorithmic bias. Yeah, it was a new term for me as well. But the good news is to the SEO problems is AI is going to get rid of all the search engines anyway. So you're not even going to have to try to move up the rankings anymore.
Perhaps. I mean, the comical thing about it to me is that AI was supposed to take over menial tasks, and there's nothing more menial than having to go on Mechanical Turk and provide feedback to these models. And so, it is kind of automating a menial feedback job in a way.
Maybe we are all menial. That's what I'm starting to realize through this. It's like, I'm pretty menial. Ugh, this is terrible.
I mean, this also reminds me of like the issues that were dealt with in like selection development, where like if you have a standardization sample that doesn't quite meet your needs, you clone specific cases, and therefore like you sort of like bias your sample that way. So I mean, it's like not necessarily something we haven't dealt with, but just not on this scale and as rapidly as everything is developing.
I don't know, Scott. Do you want to go to our last topic?
Yeah. Here, we got a little bit of time here. I'll go like for one other thing based on AI, just because it's top of mind.
Okay.
Yeah. I was traveling back from the airport at 6 a.m. Not to the airport, but back from the airport, which is not a way you want to live your life. No, I dropped somebody off. I was a mensch and like helped them out. Ooh. And like they told me like, hey, I got a flight Friday morning. We dropped me off. I was like, Friday morning, no big deal. I didn't know it was like freaking 4 a.m.
Well, I got a rapid fire question about this, Scott. Are you a better friend if you drop someone off at the airport at 5 a.m. or if you help them move? Which one of those is more of a better friend?
Oh, they come with their own set of pain, don't they?
The picking up from the airport depends on the city. I would say
that's true.
Not as bad. I mean, 4 o'clock in the morning is rough, but the airport's not that far here in Seattle. It could be LA, for example. That would be.
If you're asking friends to help you move after the age of like 32, like you're just a bad person. That's not good. That's not
a group
good.
Of men who are all over the age of 32. Well, so is there an age limit on driving to the airport? Like if you're asking someone to drive you to the airport over the age of 32, are you still a jerk?
No, I don't. I'd have to think about it.
He hesitated. There's some yes there. There's a little yes.
The fact that the Ubers are so expensive in Seattle, I understand. Like in other cities, Ubers are not nearly as expensive as they are here.
Yeah, but he already said the airport's closer too. So does the closeness of the airport diminish the more expensive Uber?
I mean, the expensive Uber, it's like $140 to get to the airport.
I guess it depends where in Seattle.
Yeah. No, it's wildly expensive. Anyway, here, full circle, back to it. I'm driving back from the airport, and I was complaining about getting up so early, clearly. But anyway, I was listening to NPR, and there's a teacher on there, and he's essentially a professor. And he's essentially, worried about, students turning in papers, AI generated content, this sort of stuff. And he said, well, let's just turn it to assignment. I want the students to write a paper using ChatGPT. They cannot write anything manually. And he turned it to an assignment. So their task was then to critique what was written there, identify flaws in the argument, and where specific hallucinations may have occurred. I thought that was a really fascinating way to kind of like reverse the trend on students.
I feel like it's like where you do something wrong and then they force you to do more of it. Like I don't know, this may be totally random, but like I remember when I was younger, like if somebody would like get caught drinking in high school and then their parents would make them drink so much that they never wanted to drink again. Like it sounds like it's like that. It's like punishment.
I think it's awesome.
It increases critical thinking. I think that's the whole goal. That's the whole goal
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
like, school
Yeah.
anyway. It's like think through problems and this sort of thing. But if we're going to be in a world faced with generative AI, you need to be able to spot the flaws in the argument that's produced even automatically.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's a more and more of an important skill, not just processing information from AI, but from people as well.
Yeah.
The media and the information out there is so much bias and things in papers and articles. Having the ability to process that, identify the issues, identify the flaws, how you'd improve it, etc., I think is a critical skill.
Especially if you have this circular information bias.
Yeah.
Right.
When I think about this too, and this, I know this kind of goes into the sort of out there territory, which we usually don't get into too much on the podcast, but I'm wondering, like, the more I think about it, the more you interact with an AI and you get it to do basically everything you need to do on your job, the more you're training the AI to replace you. And so there was this period of time where, AI was being used in chess and the best teams in the world were AIs combined with human beings. And then the AI got so good that it just like crushed everyone and everything. Are we like speeding up that adoption of AI to like completely make us, menial, like we were saying earlier? We said all the things that we're doing are menial tasks. Are by getting students to do this, are we basically training the AIs to be better than humans faster?
Well, I think we're at like a sweet spot right now where the AI isn't that good that it can't be fooled. But I think that we're not far away from it being really good. Like we were just starting to talk about AI, like 9 months ago.
I think yes, absolutely. I think that's the way that a lot of these models are going to improve and fine tune is through constant human feedback. And at work is a great example. Understanding the context of what you're doing in your business, etc., all of that's only going to be fed in through constant feedback to optimize those models to that case. So I think you're spot on, whether that's unfortunate or fortunate.
Unfortunately, there are some jobs that are more exposed to AI than others. We got this article. I found it. I think David Green retweeted, who's just probably the preeminent people analytics aggregator out there. But essentially, AI integration is becoming more common in the workplace, or essentially will be, pretty soon. And Ben Zweig examined the gender and ethnic distributions among those AI exposed jobs. I think like payroll, bookkeeping, this sort of thing. And a majority of those employees in the top 15 AI exposed jobs were women, 71% of all employees, that is. So women are underrepresented in tech jobs, but are more represented in these sort of support roles, which have high overlap with AI. Racial differences were present, but not as pronounced. So, I mean, AI has some interesting implications for our workforce.
Definitely could offset some of the gains that have happened since COVID, but I'm glad you gave Ben a shout out. He's actually a friend in another company who's doing a lot of really cool research that they publish freely out there, and so love what Revelio Labs is doing. It's really cool.
Their newsletter is fantastic. Every few weeks they publish a lot of great stuff. It did occur to me that I think that is unfortunate. I think it is going to be a challenge, particularly in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
And the article points out that the way around this is reskilling, and for those roles to adapt and to move into different spaces, etc. Which I think ultimately you will see, and you've seen this in other cases in history when certain roles and certain types of work become automated. What I'm most excited about with these generative models is the opportunity for training, for education, for building skills. The idea that you could have a personal tutor to teach you a particular topic, to teach you a new skill, to speed up a lot of that and understand what your weaknesses are, etc. And hopefully some of that application will speed up that move and mitigate some of that downside.
That is so true. Like the AI for the teaching space is just a wonderful field. We covered some article like a few weeks ago, essentially showed that the jobs that are not AI exposed are the sort of like electrician, plumber, these sort of jobs that are largely male dominated. And I don't know, are we all going to be plumbers and electricians in the future? Well, until robots really come
Yeah.
on. Like you think the AI is great. Wait till you get robots that can do all this sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, I've been seeing the kill switch engineer jobs floating around of the people who pull the plug when AI becomes sentient. You know,
What?
so I'm training for that job personally.
I'd honestly,
You're training for it? It's in the
Yeah.
switch.
Just
strengthening your finger,
pulling it out of the wall as quickly as possible. Take that power source away.
Maybe you will outsource it to some sort of AI, like just like the other people.
Well, like I want to come back to what you're really saying, Scott, about like, these kind of personal coach AIs. I mean, the whole premise there is that AI is already better than you and it's going to coach you and teach you how to do all of these things. So if these AI, I see a lot about AI personal assistants, but I'm thinking more of like the AIs that are going to be the personal coaches. That already is under the premise that human beings are worse at everything than AIs are. And I'm like, that's not good. I don't know. I'm not excited about that future.
It's a tool. It's a tool. Just like you don't need to know your like mathematical times tables. You got a calculator. Why would you need to memorize these sort of things anymore?
Yeah, but then your calculator didn't teach you how to be better at pickleball right after it got done. It just did
Well, you're saying
calculations.
is, well, I mean, it's clearly a dumber version of AI, but it is AI, right? It's using an algorithm to derive these sort of things.
I think it's a question of, on what time scales these things happen. I think the AI to teach you pickleball is a little further out, but the AI that can understand a particular topic like physics really well and teach that to you if that's what you want to move into, or some other type of work, marketing, etc., that understands that space really well and can skill you up super quickly, a focus one, that feels like it's already here, if not a couple of years away.
Yeah, well, they're going to have to teach you how to market to AIs because they're going to be the ones making procurement decisions in the future. And it's like,
circular.
This is all terrible. Exactly. It's circular algorithmic bias right here. This is it.
It's not the bias at that point. It's just circular algorithm.
Exactly.
That's a singularity that Kurzweil talks about. That's a singularity where AI starts teaching AI.
All right, we've done it. This is how we wrap. Philip, it's been really great having you on the podcast, man. And dude, thank you so much for being a sponsor as well. It was fun learning about your product and just getting to talk about it sometimes and seeing the research you guys put out there. So thanks for what you're doing. Any final words, Scott, from you for Philip?
No, I'll just iterate that Philip, it's great to meet you. Great insights, good conversation. Look forward to it in the future.
Yeah, likewise. Keep up the great work. Love the podcast. Love all the fascinating discussions you have with people and the style of it. And so happy that we were able to support you all. Disappointed that I didn't get any questions about Waffle House today. I was expecting preparing my answer there, but maybe next time we'll get into it.
Philip, we can always come back for round 2. I mean, that is a possibility.
You want to do a quick Waffle House?
Looking forward to it. Well, I've actually never been to Waffle House, so I want a recommendation for when I do go. I've driven past it many times and wondered what wonders lie beyond those
you were waffling about doing a Waffle House. Like, yes. This is the most meta waffle experience.
So you had a sort of existential crisis, like passing the Waffle House. I love this. What's intriguing about it? What do you see that you got to do, or just all the people? It's the network analysis. So people flock to the Waffle House, and like you say, like, what's going on there? I need to get in there.
It's that, people talking about it all the time. It's I see the sign everywhere, and then it's just the chicken and waffles. Like, I have to wrap my head around what that even is, what that means. I need to.
I don't even know if they sell chicken and waffles at Waffle House. But maybe they do.
Cole worked at Waffle House.
Yeah, they didn't sell chicken and waffles then. They may have brought it in recently, but
they don't. I thought they had chicken and waffles there. Then I'm less excited.
I feel like if you
You-
ordered it, you would get it.
And I used to have this memorized. It's like smothered, covered, pasted. Like they have all the different things you can put on a waffle, but chicken was not one of those things. Anyway, I think we've officially gone off the rails. Philip, it's been amazing having you on the podcast. So you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Linux podcast with Colin Scott and Philip Arkcoll from Worklytics. Thank you for joining us today, Philip.
Thank you both.
As always, all opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
You've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott.